Hello and welcome to Different Perspectives. I am Paul Ndiho. Despite Angola's vast natural wealth, its education system tells a different story. Over 2.5 million children are out of school, and more than 25% of the population remains illiterate. Why? It's not about lack of will. The kids want to learn. It's a lack of space, resources, and access. According to the Angolan press and news agency, nearly 19% of school-age children are unable to enroll due to overcrowded or non-existent classrooms. Progress is happening slowly. On December 8th, 2023, the World Bank launched a $550 million 10-year initiative aimed at boosting Angola's higher education, improving program and quality governance. But post-war recovery is a long road. From destroyed infrastructure to limited rural access, the challenges remain steep. Joining me to unpack the crisis and the way forward are two distinguished gentlemen. Rafael Marques, Executive Director of Ufolo Center for Good Governance, who is working to build rural schools, and Greg Pirio, Director of Extractive Industries and Human Development Center at the Institute of World Affairs, and a global education and development expert. Gentlemen, welcome to Different Perspectives.
Good to be here.
Good to be here as well, Paul. Thank you for inviting me to the program.
There is a lot happening in Angola. Angola also happened to be one of those countries gifted by nature. But when it comes to education, Angola lags behind most of the African countries. Why is that? Let's start this conversation by you maybe bringing us up to speed where things stand as far as education is concerned.
I think education is the most critical issue the country is facing at the moment. And we cannot look forward on how to move ahead without having investment in education. Just to give you an example of how bad it is, we have a very young population. We're over 36 million people now, and over 3 million children are out of the school system, primary education. If you add those in the 2 grades above, we're talking about 5 million children in the country that do not go to school for lack of facilities, teachers that are excluded from the education system. And those who attend public schools face such a myriad of problems. Given the quality of education, for instance, the curricula has not been changed for the past 20, 25 years. So we have an outdated curricula, which does not prepare the children to tackle basic learning skills. To have basic learning skills, like, for instance, to do simple math, be fluent in the language, and have basic writing skills. So with that in mind, what we've been producing in the past decades are graduates, many of whom cannot read and write properly. That's why we're at a point in this country where we have lawyers who do not master the language, have very poor command of the language. We have mathematicians who can't do basic exercises in accounting. So that means Angola has to rely exceedingly on foreign consultancy to do basic things, such as, for instance, preparing our state budget. It needs to be done by a Portuguese company.
Greg, you are an educator yourself. You have been to Angola a couple times, and you've seen firsthand how the education system there is on its knees. From your vantage point, what can you tell us? How important is education in some of these countries, especially Angola?
Let me just say I've been to Angola many times. but let me talk about, I wasn't there to study the education system, but I've done a lot of study of education across sub-Saharan Africa. And education is so incredibly important. Um, uh, and I'm looking at it lots of times from perspective of how to um, empower youth to move ahead in life and be entrepreneurial and have the skills they need in a livelihood. There, like in Angola, there's so many countries that have such a large um, uh, youth demographic, and one of the reasons for this is there's been a lot of success in maternal and child health that allows today and for the last couple decades more children to survive, and so that has led to this large population. But we need the institutions in place and functioning well in order for the youth to benefit from it, and so that they have the skills to get ahead. If that doesn't exist, and if youth uh, are frustrated by the system, that can lead to all kinds of violence by youth. They feel alienated, they join gangs, they may, you know, I'll give you, there's so many examples of this. So it's, so um, for the youth themselves, for the stability of society, for developing human-centered um, systems. It's so, education is so important.
Raphael, you talked about how you have a huge population, especially young people who are not part of the system, who are not in the school system. Are there any efforts by the government really to address that?
Just weeks ago, we finished furnishing a school we built and we furnished. And I went to hand over to the local authorities. And this is a gift we're providing to a joint venture between the private sector and civil society to help build more schools, because we have major problem with the lack of public schools in the country. And the local authority refused to get the key of a very nice school that we built, because said, well, it has not come with computers. And this is an area where there is no electricity. It's in a village. And we try to provide all the conditions that are beyond, above and beyond the conditions, the local conditions. But then they were asking for computers. And this is a gift to the state when it is the responsibility of the state to provide such conditions as putting computers in the schools. But we don't have computers in primary schools for classrooms. So even when one is trying to help, you find these kinds of impediments and situations to discourage people to actually deliver, to do the right thing, because that's the only way you can have a structure, the same political party in power for more than 50 years, and without having the people to really complain about it, or to have a strong opposition, or to have a stronger system that demands the basic deliverance of basic services. And just to give you an example of how very little is being done, primary schools in Angola are not budgeted for in terms of the upkeep of the schools, in terms of the necessary finances, for instance, to buy chalk, to write on the chalkboards. And we're talking about 89% of the schools that do not receive any type of budget from the state budget. And if we look at primary schools, that number is even greater. So all of them don't receive.
Do a quick follow-up. We are not
Yes.
talking about a banana republic here. We are talking about Angola, a country endowed with so many resources.
I've told you that 89% of the public schools in Angola, that includes other levels beyond primary schools. But for me, my focus is the primary, because if you don't have good primary education, you cannot have the other levels. It all begins with primary education. And we're still at a situation of the more than 10,000 public schools we have in the country. 82% of them do not have any kind of electricity, power, any source of power. And 6 out of 10 schools do not have access to water. And only 13% of them have drinkable water. So you're sending millions of children to school where they can't even get access to drinking water. But you don't hear a serious conversations on how to change the fundamental for this country to have a future, which is its education system.
What Rafael's saying is really very interesting. I wondered two things. One, Rafael, what can be done to change the mindset in Angola so that people hold government accountable? And what is your organization doing in its own way to try to correct the situation?
One of the ways to address this issue, and we started already doing it, is by raising the question that public primary schools are not budgeted for, and the problems that have led to this. Public primary schools are not considered to be part of the structures that merit a budget. For instance, public primary schools cannot even open bank accounts because they do not have the legal status that would enable them to open bank accounts. So what happens, even though we have constitutionally free education, primary education should be free, it ends up not being free because parents have to collect money every month for the basic needs of many of these schools. And this money cannot be deposited into the schools' bank accounts because the schools do not have bank accounts. So in many instances, the money goes to the headmaster's personal account, or in other cases where local communities are better organized, there is a parents' association that control those funds, and so they don't get lost.
Greg, from your work at the Extractive Industries and Human Development Center, Institute of World Affairs, is there something that you can do? We are talking about a country here that is very well gifted by nature. They have all sorts of minerals. They have all sorts of oil products coming out of Angola. Is there something that your partners, the world, can do to help this in the case of education in Angola?
We're looking at right now in the 21st century, we're seeing this incredible rush for strategic minerals in around the world. In Africa in particular, there's a lot of investment going in. And Western countries are now competing with the Chinese in particular for these strategic resources. And the Chinese monopolize a lot of it. So what's going on now is you have all this Western investment going in, And with technology like artificial intelligence, they're able to much more easily identify where they can put mines and things like that. And the data we have on Angola is that Angola is rich in all these minerals that are in demand right now. So what, as a center, we're trying to do, not only in Angola, but in other countries, is to work with corporations so that their investments make sure that they come back, the part that goes to the government, or if they're directing investing in local communities, that money is spent well on education. And building schools is one thing, but there's a whole system that's important. And part of our argument to the corporations is, if you don't get this right, um, you can have a backlash from local communities who may be losing access to land or water and things like that. So this whole human development aspect, education is a big part of it. And we have on our website actually a article on um, this issue, and sort of the best practices in terms of using schools as instruments of peace and social cohesion, because it's really important. Of course, health delivery, health services are important too, etc. But the communities have to define. But there are a number of things that are important. Rafael mentioned, for instance, schools that have these parent teachers association. That can be an important part. And so to make sure that they're strong, that they help in the governance of it, they can help try to mobilize local labor and resources to make these schools function and all that. So for the corporations, if they want stability and make profit, they have to ensure, working with government and local communities, that education is a big part of this. And so that's part of what our message is out there. And yeah, and we're trying to work with corporations to get them to understand and to adopt the good practices that we know work.
Rafael, do you think what's their role? All these corporations who are making a ton of money from Angola, what's their role when it comes to corporate social responsibility? Are they in any way helping these communities to get better, or they're just extracting whatever they can take and leave?
Oftentimes, what you just have is the extraction and flight of resources, and very little is left in these communities that they can actually cherish the wealth their ground has provided. And one prime example is the diamond-rich regions of the Lundas. It has some of the worst education indicators in the country. That's where you find classrooms with over 290 children in one small classroom, primary education. That's where you find, because of lack of infrastructures, you find that children only take classes 2 hours a day, because they have to have as many shifts as possible to try to have as many children going to school. And once the diamonds run out there, what that region will be left with is just potholes and craters where diamonds have been dug. So it's really important to sensitize these major projects, diamond projects, oil projects, and others, to come up with an integrated plan, you know, where a pool of funding is made available for education, you know, with expertise to go with it, so that there is the bridging of efforts from the private sector, civil society, government, and others to deliver and to ensure that education is a priority in the country. Recently, I wrote a letter to the president explaining what our project is doing in terms of working with the Ministry of Education, the private sector, and civil society organizations, local organizations, to help train the teachers. And it's a very small project. And in 3.5 years, we've been able to train more than 1,000 teachers to deliver some form of basic education and introducing new methodologies. For instance, we still use the teacher-centered methodologies in which the teacher goes to this classroom and dictates what the children must do. So with very little interaction, so that the children can build critical thinking. And that's what we're trying to bring about. Also, we've held public discussions with the Ministry of Education, provincial governments, Ministry of Finance on this pressing need for schools to be budgeted. So they have some basic resources for maintenance, even if it's just to buy chalk. And when we build schools, there has to be also a model of evolving communities to take care of those schools, to participate in their construction, in their maintenance, so that by doing that, people see the benefits.
Beyond the training of some of these teachers, some of the communities to get involved, you're also doing some incredible work. Your team has been able to build some schools in some of those communities. What does it take to do that?
Actually, it takes goodwill and resilience to insist that we must do much more for the country. And oftentimes, one of the problems also we have is that people do not see education as a fundamental right. And that's one of the wrong things. For instance, when you look at civil society, and especially in these interactions we've had with Western organizations, people have reduced the idea of fundamental rights to civil and political rights, such as the right to protest, the freedom of expression, freedom of the press. But none of these will really be helpful if we're leaving generations of Angolans out of the system. If they're excluded from the basic education they need, they deserve constitutionally. And that's why, to me, who have been at the forefront of fighting for human rights in this country, I have now chosen to concentrate on education, because if we don't do that, and Greg said it clearly, sooner or later we will run into serious problems and violence because of this huge youth bulge that is not being educated. And to change this narrative, first and foremost, we need to put education at the center of our discussions.
Greg, for any country to develop, really, the focus has to be on education, empowering those young people so that they can take on leadership, they can be the headmasters, they can be the professors at these universities. Any country that has developed economically, it has to start with empowering that community, that human capital. You look at the likes of China, the number one investment is in human capital. You look at Singapore, Malaysia, or any other country here in the United States. What can Angolans learn from maybe other countries, using your experience as an educator, places that you visited? What can you share with Angolans so that they can maybe borrow those ideas to make their country better?
Let me give you a personal part of this story. It's my life story, in a sense, is that I came from a large family. We had 8 kids in it. My dad uh, only finished the sixth grade. Both my parents were immigrants. English was their second language. They learned it in the United States as they came from as children, and
Right.
I had to go and start working when I was 11 years old to help the family out and pay for food and all of this. But for me, all along the way, there were helping hands, people and systems helping me to get ahead and to study. Fortunately, I was in the state of California at the time, and which had an incredible system. Um, so I was able to go to you know university free, graduate school um, pretty much free, and it doesn't exist that way today. But all along, the 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 state was there investing in us, and even the community where I was raised. There were people there supporting the local schools and things like that. So for me, I understand the importance of it. Is um, uh, uh, the community is really important, but our community has to be these days is global. It's local, it's national, it's global. We need to be thinking in terms like that. So
It
I
takes a
just
village to raise the community, a child,
yeah
something like
yeah
that.
the emphasis has to be that uh, the individual is really realized in community, and we need to think of it that way. Um, I am in fact on a member of a board of um, of directors of a nonprofit in Uganda called the Jolt Youth Initiative. And what this is a brilliant initiative being done by um, Ugandans. And what they're doing is they're intervening in schools and working with youth, teaching them skills in conflict resolution, um, working so that with girls to avoid teenage pregnancies, which is, through the in school, teaching livelihood skills, how to be entrepreneurs, values and that. Um, so, this can be done, and I mean that it's that kind of thing that really inspires me to to keep working on these issues. Is that sort of thing. So it is so critically important.
Raphael, it's not that the young people in Angola don't want to go to school. It's their government that has failed them. The government has no budget for these young people, for these schools. The children want to be enrolled in schools, but they lack the basic necessities to be in those schools. They lack every single thing. The teachers don't get paid. With all the resources that Angola has, why is that not a priority? Why are people not holding their leaders accountable when it comes to empowering these young people?
Let me put it this way to you. We have within our elites a very pervasive neo colonial mindset. To give you an example, we have one of the most expensive primary schools in Africa, private primary schools. We have schools here where government officials, rich people are paying, oil corporations are paying $40,000 a year per children in Angola right now. Yes, and these schools, of course, have water and toilets, basic conditions. So when you create such a system, you know, then those at the top think that the way for them to remain at the top is by ensuring that those at the bottom get nothing.
From what Raphael is saying, it looks like it doesn't matter who comes into power. It's already something that has been ingrained in people. They don't think about how to improve the education system. They don't talk about healthcare. They don't talk about things that really matter. How can they change that mindset?
Basically, you need to, within civil society, to develop a um, a framework, or for what is important to the country, and what you want to get out of all the investments that are coming in, and the profits that are being made that get transferred to the government or to the elites, and where should that priority be? And there and I think Rafael is hitting on something, is to begin to look at education as a human right, and that is just fundamental, um, but it's a challenge to create this vision of what Angola could look like, but it's important to do that. And for the international community, I mean, for the companies that are investing, um, I mean, in their conversations, it would be important to say, we need a stable system here in order to invest in your country. We need stability. We need, so, those conversations should probably take place. It's not something that is done, but I think we have no choice but to suggest that it be done now, because change is really important. But I think it has to come from the bottom up, and um, people need to begin to say, this is what we want, this is what we have. And groups like uh, organizations like the one that Rafael has started, they can
Ufolo
say,
Center.
look what we can accomplish. Look what we can accomplish when we do these things, um, and we deserve it. We deserve it.
How about you, Rafael? Are there some bright spots when it comes to this sector, really? Is there something that you can do, or you have done, or the government can do, at least to brighten up this uh, grim picture for when it comes to education?
Nowadays, currently, we have a number of companies that are coming forward to provide also their contributions to the project and to the discussions. And also, what is important, like in the past, some of these companies would not be associated with us because of our stigmas being very too critical of the authorities. But when it comes to education, there is that understanding that they're providing some very basic support for the children of this country, and that does not need to be politicized, but it needs to be encouraged and to bring in other sectors. For instance, we started this project with the support of a bank, private bank. And that would not happen before a bank, a foundation belonging to a bank, partnering with critical civil society organization to deliver on an education project. And it keeps growing.
I've worked in Angola on malaria projects, a consultant working with the Ministry of Health. What I saw there was quite an investment by corporations to fight malaria. I remember one of the major oil companies gave $3 million to USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, to invest in uh, uh, malaria prevention and treatment, and they did that. I remember meeting with corporations um, that they had set up a foundation, and they were willing to give money in certain areas to certain provinces to help out. And I remember the Diamond Company paying for the transport of bed nets to protect the people in the communities around the diamond areas from malaria. So it's possible to mobilize corporations and that to fill in some of the gap and to do this. And so, that's an important tactic to use. In health, it works. It can work in education, as Rafael's projects have demonstrated.
You are doing some incredible work through your center, the Ufolo Center for Good Governance. You're doing some incredible work there. How can maybe other people borrow a key from you to take that country forward, especially when it comes to education?
Yes, absolutely. And first and foremost, it's all about love, you know, love for the people, love for the country, and the willingness and the strength to nurture that love by being helpful to the communities that need the most. Um, Let me just give you one final example. We are supposed to build a school in this faraway place, and we're having a problem because of the roads that do not get there. And this is a village where children have to walk 26 kilometers to reach school. And the school is a makeshift church, a mud and brick church. So in my discussions with a private construction company that works in that region, the gentleman said, well, I know you and I know what you're doing. I will let you pay me what you have as long as I become part of the project. So this is a very small construction company, local company, very small. And the gentleman, the owner, decided by his own volition not to charge me commercial prices, but to say, pay me what you can. And I will be part of the project and I will co-sponsor the construction of this school and find solutions to take the materials to this area. So I think sometimes we have to lead by example, And it prides me to see that there are fellow countrymen who come and say, well, I also want to help, even if it just means providing something very symbolic or basic. And my advice is that, and especially to people in Angola and in Africa, is that we have to think of education as a major human rights issue and start addressing it the same way we put so much effort in addressing questions of civil and political liberties. Because at the core of all this is education. And the more we press for education, the more we will build that understanding that we are all here to contribute.
This is just critical because by providing quality education to children, they learn to know that others care for them, that they're worthy, that there's nothing worse to have this sense that I'm unworthy. And it leads to all kinds of bad behavior in life. So I think, education is so fundamental to that. Children everywhere need to know that adults care for them and want to care for them and to see them thrive in society. And so, in terms of building a society and a community, education is just so fundamental.
Well, gentlemen, I will leave it at that. I think the key words for me, we should look at education as a human rights issue.
Absolutely.
Well,
Great.
gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Okay,
you, Paul.
thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Rafael Marques, Executive Director of Ufolo Center for Good Governance, and Greg Pirio, Director of Extractive Industries and Human Development Center at the Institute of World Affairs. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Paul Ndiho on X, Instagram, Threads, Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and YouTube.